Is Florida State University one step closer to beating the ACC in court?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Today's episode of Locked On ACC is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are, of course, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to talk about transfer portal winners in the ACC now that the dust is settling on the spring transfer portal. I do want to take a look at a very interesting top 30 college football preseason ranking from a pretty prominent member of the media. But we've got to talk about the latest in the court fight, right? Because being a couple blokes like ourselves who covered the ACC, what's the ACC going to look like in a few years, a few months? Okay. Kenton, this filing was made official earlier this week by Leon County Judge John C. Cooper. That's the judge that's hearing the Florida version of the FSU versus ACC lawsuit. Earlier this week, Judge Cooper officially filed his denial of the ACC's motion to stay. That goes back to what they discussed in the first hearing. He hasn't made his official filing based on the second hearing just yet, but this is definitely a victory for Florida State University because Judge Cooper, in denying the ACC's motion to stay, repeatedly brings up the issue of forum shopping, which was basically when the ACC found out FSU was going to sue them in Florida, the ACC actually rushed and sued Florida State in North Carolina first, hoping for a favorable ruling based on the idea that's held legally that whoever files first gets favorable treatment. But in Judge Cooper's eyes, that was an anticipatory filing. He refers to it as forum shopping. So he's on to the ACC shenanigans, I guess we could say.
Well, good for the Florida State. I think that this is an absolute win. I think that they're in a good spot in the Leon, or what is it, Hayes County?
Leon County.
Leon County. Okay, I think they're in a good spot in the Leon County filing here. And again, this thing is going to be slow. It's going to be battles like this for months, if not years. There's going to be bit by bit, war of attrition. I win a battle here, you win a battle there. I win a battle here, you win a battle there. Because that's what this has been so far. That's what this thing has objectively been. It hasn't been one side whooping the wheels off the other to where it's like, man, what is the ACC going to do, or what is Florida State going to do? This just seems like it's just part of the process. And again, absolute win for Florida State. Absolute win in that the case is still going to be proceeding, and that this judge has decided, hey, you're going to still have to stick in this fight for the time being in the state of Florida. Credit to him, and I think that the anticipatory filing thing is very interesting, but at least the judge has cited some good precedent from what you've told me off air. He's bought in stuff where it's like, you cannot argue that legal precedent has not been set, that this is a normal thing, that this is something that there's a legal ground for this. And at least on this matter, it won't have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court to say, hey, this has never happened before. We've never seen anything like this before. What do you 9 guys and gals say?
Yeah, just so people understand the situation, I did mention it. There's a lawsuit happening in Florida, in Leon County. That's Tallahassee, Florida State versus the ACC. There's also that lawsuit happening in North Carolina, the ACC versus Florida State. And like you mentioned, the judge, actually, I thought he did a good job citing precedent from a North Carolina case, which determined, forum shopping. You can't just manipulate the situation to try to file first. Something that is worth noting about this particular judge, Kenton, the Honorable Judge Cooper, which this goes to outline how important it is to have home court advantage, pun intended here, right? Why the ACC can probably expect to do better in the North Carolina part of the lawsuit. Florida State can expect to do better in Florida. So Judge Cooper, I don't know. Maybe every judge in Leon County has degrees from Florida State University, but Judge Cooper, I just read this morning, is a double FSU grad. He's got his undergraduate degree and his law degree from Florida State. So, I'm not necessarily saying that makes him biased, but it is interesting.
If he were on the jury for this type of thing, wouldn't they be like, hey, this jury is dismissed? Like,
right.
Our legal system is such a sham in so many ways. And this one here is just, I'm very confused as to how an alum can also be the judge for a case that very directly impacts this school. I guess they thought that Miami grads would hate him too much, or Florida grads would hate him too much, or grads or Bethune-Cookman grads, or I guess neither of those schools have undergraduate or law schools anymore. I don't know which of them actually do have law schools, so I'm not going to pretend to know. But
I know Miami and Florida do for sure. I'm not sure about the other ones.
Yeah, well, maybe they just didn't want to get Gator chomped on out of court, and so maybe there was a little shopping inside the forum shopping. Yeah. Maybe there was some reshopping, and now we're just going around with grocery lists, getting exactly who we want at this point. Because maybe I'm crazy here, but I feel like that's a little bit of a conflict of interest. But who knows?
Yeah. And when we try, Kenton and I, to figure out what's really going on with all the conference realignment talk, there's a lot of clickbait out there. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of conflicting information. So I like to offer that disclaimer anytime, I read things, because obviously what's really happening behind the scenes when it comes to university presidents and chancellors and conference commissioners, they're keeping those conversations pretty tight and pretty close to the vest. Okay. I've seen some reports and some speculation out there. Kenton, I know that there was that one report a couple months ago that was claiming the whole ACC could collapse by June 30th of this year. I don't see a whole lot of traction for that recently. I have seen a little traction for an idea that maybe the ACC settles with Florida State and Clemson by, as early as August. If that were to happen, I don't think that would mean they leave the conference immediately. I think that there would be an exit that maybe happens a year or two down the road. And I'm also seeing some stuff. I know the Big Ten information account on X posts a lot of things about conference realignment, some stuff that, he seems to know some things. But again, a lot of this information, it's tough to really filter what's real and what's not. There's also some speculation out there that the ACC, if you concede the idea that Florida State and Clemson are going to leave, it's just a matter of when, that they're actually working to find some sort of a settlement that ensures that the 4 North Carolina schools stay in the conference and they don't lose, UNC, NC State, Duke, Wake Forest. You keep those teams, because I guess, like, if you look at it, the history of the heart and soul of the ACC, North Carolina, that's ACC country. They want to make sure they hold on to those schools at all costs.
In the words of Kendrick Lamar on the song 616 in LA, it's survival. Yeah. It's survival. That's literally what the ACC is looking at. This is about the survival of the conference as we know it. If there even is a buyout reach, they have to make sure that number is too high for everybody else. Yeah. Period. You cannot give a number like, sure, we'll let you out for 110, 120, because I'm sure more teams have that than have, let's say, 300, let's say 250. And I'm not saying that 110 is easy to get. I'm not saying that, all these schools could magically pull 120 out of their behind. But I'm just saying, if you're, as the kids doing these videos, double it and give it to the next guy. That's what they want to do in terms of that, the number that, is sounding very favorable to both Clemson and FSU with the around 100 or so. This is objectively, if you let a team out for that low of a price, this is why I keep saying the longer this thing goes on, the less likely that the ACC is to hit them with a settlement that's fairly low, unless they just get slapped to sleep in court because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. Again, it makes sense for the ACC to dig their heels in, to play this thing, to slow play it and say, oh, ESPN, I know what you want. You're not going to get it. These two teams neither one's going to be in the SEC anytime soon. We know that's what you want, but we're going to make sure that if you are looking at our contract and saying, do we want to renew the conference or not? And I believe it's 2026 is the year that they have to decide whether or not they're going to renew.
Yeah, I think it's 2026 decision before 2027 option, something like that.
Yeah.
I think 2027 is like the magic year that would kick in.
Yeah, so I believe, and this is pure speculation. Again, I tell you when I know something, I tell you when I'm speculating, but I would speculate that the ACC wants to drag it out as long as possible, because if they can get to 2026 and these teams are still in, then ESPN has to negotiate in good faith based on, hey, you're going to have a full slate of teams, and we can't anticipate these two teams being gone necessarily, although we can write in the language of your contract, hey, if these two teams go, or if your viewership hits below a number that losing Florida State and Clemson will drop it below, it triggers a certain, you go down or whatever and pay. But at the end of the day, again, it's easier if you hold on to these teams as long as possible, because, again, you're very simply putting yourself in a better position for negotiation purposes of your next TV deal. Or next renewal, rather.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Coming up next, does the ACC not have a top 12 team in America? You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Oh, and I already know you're keeping it locked to Game Time. Folks, I'm getting the best deals on tickets last minute. I'm going to see Lionel Messi with Inter Miami. I've been going to Florida Panthers playoff games. The only ticket app that I use is GameTime, and there are important reasons for that. Folks, GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. That's why I'm such a huge fan. And it's not just NBA tickets, guys. Tickets to any sporting event, musical theater, comedy shows, they have it all on the GameTime app. Folks, the view from your seat feature is awesome. You can see a panoramic view right on the app, exactly what you'll be looking at from your seat. The all-in prices, that's a game changer. There is no bait and switch on the GameTime app. You see exactly what you're going to pay right up front, which makes that buying experience awesome. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. So Kenton, Bud Elliott from 24/7 Sports, CBS. Now he is a Florida State guy in addition to being a national guy, which what makes this really interesting. He's host of the Nolecast. He was a little snarky with the way that he framed this. He said, "Hey, everyone's getting ripped for their top 30. So I tried my hand at it, roast it." Now, again, I will remind you, Bud Elliott he's a Florida State guy. That's his background. He covers Florida State. Very interesting, a couple things. He's got Florida State ranked a spot behind Miami. So I know Bud's not a big Miami guy. Like is he trolling? But I also know he's a big fan of Cam Ward. So maybe that kind of factors into his opinion. So I found it curious. He's got in his summer top 30, Miami at 13, a spot ahead of Florida State, Clemson at number 16. But how about this, Kenton? The highest ranked ACC team he's got is number 13. It doesn't seem right.
So, I can't remember what movie it was. I believe it was Mad Max. I believe it was the newest one, not the Furiosa one, but the one with Tom Hardy in it, where
yes,
he saw somebody that was like crying out for help. and they were set up, cried out for help, looking for people to stop and help them. And he said, and I quote, "This is bait. This is bait." And that's what I'm going to say here. Hey, Bud, I get it. Trust me. Donno and I know better than anybody. This time of year is slow. Nobody wants to talk about college baseball. Not much else going on. The basketball season, dust is settled. Even in the most of the Olympic sports, your gymnasts are done. Everybody's done. You need something to piss people off and make them say, "Oh my God, what is this?" And so you do something like putting the sorry, pitiful, lazy Iowa Hawkeyes in your top 30. You do
top
something
10? Or top 28, sorry.
You do something like saying, "Hey, Virginia Tech is a top 23 team." You do something like saying, "Hey, Ole Miss is going to be a top 5 team now." Even though Ole Miss has shown us, Lane Kiffin has shown us that they are the 300 seed of the SEC. They look like a real baller. They look like a real stallion of a team until an actual phantom pulls up. Same thing with Penn State, who, again, they look like a great team until other really good teams pull up, and then all of a sudden they're getting slapped to sleep as well. So, this is, hey, more power to you, Bud. More power to you, but I just don't understand it. Brian Kelly's out here crying and throwing up over not having to pay for players and whatnot. And so somehow we're saying to ourselves, this team is just so much better. USC lost the number 1 overall pick, lost a bulk of their receiving leaders in a Lincoln Riley offense, where, by the way, to say defense is optional at USC is an understatement. It's more so they're allergic to playing defense. I heard that they allowed 20 points one time in a game, and Lincoln Riley had to have an EpiPen injected in him immediately before he was rushed to emergency services because he just could not stand the idea of not letting up 30 plus. And so, hey, more power to you. Great list, man. Enjoy it. Enjoy yourself. Have fun. But this is bait that we have taken. We are now on the hook for Bud Elliott's
nonsense. We've taken the bait. Yeah, and so obviously, one thing people may jump to the conclusion of, hey, he doesn't have an ACC team top 12. Does that mean no playoff? Well, no, because the conference winner is guaranteed to get in. So somebody's got to get in. Now we're going to be talking about in a several months, leading up to the final CFP ranking. Is the ACC going to get 2 teams in, 3 teams in? How many at-larges will they have? A conference winner is definitely guaranteed to get in. And, listen, I think, I would expect Florida State to be better than 14th. I obviously, being a Miami guy, I have my hopes that Miami can sneak into the top 12 when it's all said and done. If you look at some of the big questions that these teams are going to have to answer, Kenton, I think for Miami, getting everybody on the same page quickly with some new important players, the front 7, maybe covering for a defensive backfield that's just has a lot of inexperience, are questions for Miami. For Florida State, I think it's really simple: quarterback and receivers. Like how many? I think their running game's going to be fine. I think their defense is going to be fine. But if you're going to have to make some special plays with your passing offense, are they going to be able to do that after losing their top 2 receivers and after losing Jordan Travis? How's DJ Uiagalelei going to step up? I think are my big questions for Florida State. For Clemson, we talked about them a lot this week, Kenton. I think depth is one question for them. Do they have the same depth that they had when they were, multiple champion team under Dabo Swinney in recent incarnations? And can Cade Klubnik step up and be a true franchise quarterback this year?
Yeah, I think that answer is a resounding no, but we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
I don't have high hopes for Cade Klubnik, but we will, again, if they can answer that question, Clemson can be special. There's no doubt about that. If they can kind of build around his deficiencies and make things kind of work in that regard, absolutely. Florida State, we've talked about it all offseason, and I'm sure that DJU probably has this show on repeat in his ear saying, am I the drama? Am I the problem? Is it me? And, Miami, even with the secondary being a little bit unproven, I really don't have that big of a problem with that. For me, it's chemistry and identity. Don't get me wrong. We know that Mario likes to play downhill, no frills. I'm coming. We're punching you in the mouth. But again, with the amount of transfers that you bring in, do they have that identity? Do they have that constitution? And you can say, well, we did our due diligence, and that's how we got guys out of the portal and all that. And sure, sounds good in theory. But, when you're working with a transfer portal situation, some of the guys that you've gotten, they may not. They may have it on paper. They may have it when they were next to this guy, but when you put them next to that guy, all of a sudden the math and the calculus on how physical, how imposing they are changes a little bit. So, I'm not going to say that any ACC team is without sin, but the same thing can apply to all of these teams virtually.
Oh, yeah.
Except maybe Georgia and Ohio State. Those are and Michigan. I'd probably say those are the most complete teams where I'm like, I don't really see too many. But everybody else, Texas is replacing two phenomenal defensive tackles. Not good. Phenomenal. The two that they're replacing, I watch film on them and I wonder how they went as late as they did, because both of them could do things that I'm just like, these guys, as a defensive tackle myself, watching their film was like, oh my God, this is different. Bama, to say that they've had a culture shift, to have Bama Willie out at practices on the field, very different from a Nick Saban thing.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Kalen DeBoer, by the way. And we'll see. I mean, it's so early in his tenure over there, but I already start hearing stories because I talk to a lot of recruiting analysts and people who go all over the Southeast, and it doesn't really, because Alabama is a very talented state when it comes to high school talent. I mean, do not sleep on that state. It's like a really up and coming recruiting state, and it sounds to me like he's not really doing what you would expect from a coach in that area to be solidifying. And it's early. Again, he's been there for a few months. I get it. But that should be like your first order of business, right? You take the Alabama head coaching job. You got to be at every Alabama area high school, kissing babies and shaking hands and recruit.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't sound like he's doing that as much as you would expect.
Absolutely. You can't let grass grow under your feet. If you think about as much as Texas has two-a-day, as much as Texas has the Friday Night Lights and all that good stuff where you associate them with high school football, the show Two-A-Day surrounded Hoover High School, which is a national powerhouse, or was at that time a national powerhouse in Alabama. Make no bones about it. We're hitting that stage where Saban's first few recruiting classes that won national championships, their kids are how old now? Do the math.
Yeah.
Do the math. That's why Alabama's an up-and-coming state, because even the guys that didn't pan out, where did they not go? They didn't go to the NFL, so where did they very likely stay? In Alabama. Yeah. They had kids in Alabama. So all of these 6'5", 6'6" freaks of nature that, for whatever reason, football for the NFL level didn't pan out for them, their kids are now getting older and doing their thing there. And Kalen DeBoer it's only one Saban. So in all fairness, with you saying you're not sold on Kalen DeBoer, and even with me saying that there's a difference in the culture now, but and when Saban was there, there's only one Saint Nick. There's only one, and to have that expectation that, hey, you're going to be his clone or you're going to be at the level he was, you can maybe get to the level, but Kalen DeBoer is a different guy, so he's going to do it differently. But I think that there's going to take a little bit of adjustment period and into how he gets there. But again, I don't even think that the expectation that he is Saban or that he reaches that level of sustained success is fair to him. Because with all due respect, there's only one guy that could do it. And even he, when he saw what the game was turning into, was like, I'm good. I'll pass because now you can't stock up on 4 and 5 stars, and those guys are just going to sit for 2 and 3 years and say, at the end of this, it's going to be a payday. They're doing the Baby Billy in Righteous Gemstones, there will be a payday, No, that's not. They need to payday up front. Cash on deliveries. Casholas is what's going to get it done. You can't do that. You can't do that in the same way that Saban did when he first started.
Coming up next, how did now that we're pretty much done with the spring transfer portal. There's a few stragglers out there, but how did the ACC teams finish in those rankings? You want to keep it locked right here. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs with you on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. I'm addicted to Monopoly Go. I have so much fun on this app. I love trolling my friends on there, but you can also work with your friends. You can team up with them on Monopoly Go for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. All right, so Kenton, the transfer portal rankings, and this includes December. This is both 2024 windows, the winter window and the spring window. You have Ole Miss coming in first, Oregon second. I feel like Ohio State should be ranked higher. We'll get to them in a second. Texas A&M third, Alabama fourth, Texas fifth, Florida State coming sixth. They have brought in 17 commits in the 2024 transfer portal. Colorado at 7, Ohio State at 8, Washington 9, Florida 10, Louisville 11, Miami 12. So you got 3 ACC teams so far. Michigan State 13, South Carolina 14, Cal 15. I think the next ACC team is NC State coming in 18th. So that's the way we're looking at it in the portal. You were talking about all the new Miami players. Florida State brought in more players than Miami did, Kenton, 17 to 14. So they've got some new faces as well. And, you and I, we filled in for Spencer late last week on Locked On College Football. And if you actually look at the quality versus the quantity of these transfer portal classes, Ohio State slapped. Like they only brought in 6 guys, but when it comes to the quality of the class that Ohio State brought in, nobody did it better than OSU.
Oh, absolutely. I in terms of just the sheer volume, or not in terms of the sheer volume, they're not competing with most teams, but in terms of the sheer volume of starters, in the way of, hey, I know this guy's going to be our guy next year. They've got a few guys that are, I can't sing Caleb Downs' praises enough. That kid is special. But Donno, I like the point you made there about Florida State having more transfers than Miami. And the only difference I would say in terms of culture and chemistry is their head coach can come in and say, hey, I showed you the recipe for undefeated. I gave you the recipe. You follow what I told this team to do last year, and you will be on that exact same path, which is something that even if Mario pitches it, it's objectively not true. He objectively has not had that type of success in ACC country to where he can beat his chest and say, follow me. Y'all don't know which way to go. I got the key. You don't. And so, I think that plays into it a little bit in terms of the whole, like, hey, there's a lot of new transfers, but also there's the reality of my concern with Florida State is also chemistry a little bit too. Like I don't think that it's a clean, hey, I have no doubts that Florida State is going to have chemistry, because that's one of the first things that I always think about with Florida State, because even some of the guys who are returning, they got in the portal and came back. You get what I'm saying? And that's a little problematic for me. And yes, I know that sounds a little hypocritical, because one of NC State's best, Aiden White, did the same thing at NC State. But Aiden White, homegrown guy, been in the program for 4 years, feels slightly different than I believe it's Patrick Payton, who's been at Florida State for one, and was like, all right, well, where's the bag at? Let's go see. So I will very simply say this. The transfer portal window, I think it looked good, but transfer portal classes are basically, to me, baby recruiting classes that have an accelerated timeline. So we'll be able to judge this even quicker than we do recruiting classes, because recruiting class, you got to give it at least 2 to 3 years to say, oh, that class was a dud, or boy, you stole some in that one. Recruiting classes, portal recruiting classes, you can see by the end of the season, oh, this portal class, extremely impactful. This portal class, empty calories. It was the Dak Prescott of portal classes, tons of garbage time stuff. Didn't really do anything when it mattered. Sorry to any Cowboys fans. I'm a liar. I will never apologize to Cowboys fans. But the reality is, we're going to find out very quickly whose portal class is actually like that.
Yeah, well, and we're going to find out more about that, because there could be a few more pieces that could be added. I know Miami is still maybe trying to add one more to their class. So we will talk to you again on Monday. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. Make sure you follow us. I'm at Alex Donno on X. He's at TGIF_Kenton. And we'll talk to you on Monday on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.